Welcome back. It's now time to review the module and wrap up with a discussion of a practice certification exam question. In summary, in this module you learned how to differentiate between tightly and loosely coupled architectures, identify how Amazon SQS works and when to use it, identify how Amazon SNS works and when to use it, and finally, describe Amazon MQ. Here's a sample exam question. A company needs to perform asynchronous processing and has implemented Amazon Simple Queue service as part of a decoupled architecture. The company wants to ensure that the number of empty responses from polling requests are kept to a minimum. What should a solutions architect do to ensure that empty responses are reduced? The choices are A. Increase the maximum message retention period for the queue. B. Increase the maximum receives for the redrive policy for the queue. C. Increase the default visibility timeout for the queue. Or D. Increase the long polling wait time for the queue. Note the keywords. Ensure that empty responses are reduced. Consider the answer choices and rule them out based on the keywords. We'll pause a few seconds before discussing the correct answer. If you need more time to consider the answer choices, you can pause the video. We'll now consider answer choice A, increase the maximum message retention period for the queue. The message retention period is the interval between message production and message consumption. Amazon SQS automatically deletes messages that have been in a queue for longer than the maximum message retention period. You can configure the SQS message retention period to a value from 1 minute to 14 days, where the default is 4 days. Increasing the maximum message retention period for the queue lets you have longer intervals between message production and consumption. However, this setting won't change the number of times a queue is checked for a message and an empty response is returned. So this choice is incorrect. What about choice B? Increase the maximum receives for the redrive policy for the queue. The redrive policy is used to move a message from a source queue to a dead letter queue if the consumer of the source queue doesn't process a message for a specified number of times. This choice is incorrect. Increasing the maximum receives for the queue's redrive policy won't impact the number of times a queue is checked for a message and an empty response is returned. We'll move on to discuss answer choice C, increasing the default visibility timeout for the queue. So SQS sets a visibility timeout, which is a period of time when SQS prevents other consumers from receiving and processing the message. Increasing the default visibility timeout for the queue will only increase the amount of time a message in the queue is invisible to other consumers for processing. The correct answer is D, increase the long polling wait time for the queue. When the received message wait time seconds property of a queue is set to a value greater than 0, long polling is in effect. Long polling reduces the number of empty responses by enabling SQS to wait until a message is available before it sends a response to a receive message request. We highly recommend reviewing the student guide for this module prior to attempting the knowledge check. In your student guide, you'll also find links to documentation and other resources you'll use throughout this course. That concludes this module. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in the next video.